You got anything funny for the start? Take it that's a no.
I do, actually. I do have something funny for the start.
Is it funny, like hilarious funny? Like I'm going to split my sides? Or is it
No,
one of
but
your
you're going to
titles?
talk about it later.
That's not going to fucking work, is it?
All right.
All right, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of your favourite podcast, where the two guys with faces for podcasting get down with some whiskey chat, which is precisely what we're going to be doing today. My name is Mitch, and as always, I'm joined by my whiskey partner in crime, Nicholas Polacki. How are you, mate?
Mitch, I'm very well. Good to see you, man. How you doing?
Yeah, good, mate. But I'm gonna kick the show off this episode on a bit of a sort of, I suppose, downer note, which isn't like us to do it, but I just wanted to take a moment just to recognize something pretty sad that's happened in the whiskey world this week. I heard the sad news that the legend and good friend of the show and good friend of mine, Paul McDonagh, creator of the iconic whiskey bar, the Bon Accord, passed away, unfortunately. So for those listening, you've probably run into Paul at some point when you've been in the Bon Accord or when you've been out in Glasgow. You know, he ran that bar for 22 years and was always so hospitable to everyone who walked into the bar. Not only passionate about whiskey, but also getting people into their whiskey journey and ensuring that they had a great time, not only when they were at his bar, but just out and about. Such a generous guy. We had him on the show last year, and it's an episode called Whiskey Pubs. And I told this story about Paul's sort of generosity before we actually interviewed him. But, I'm going to tell it again. I'd known Paul way back from my Diageo days, and I'd always kind of called into the Bon Accord. And I was this young guy just getting into whiskey. And I always remember he kind of took me under his wing, so to speak, and just very generous with his time with me. And I hadn't seen him for a long time. I'd moved over to the US when we were hanging out, Nick. And I came back for a trip and made it over to Glasgow, sat at the bar, chatted to Paul, had some lunch. Not only was he so generous enough to not allow me to pay for my lunch, but I'd been eyeing up a bottle of Highland Park that he'd done with the Independent Bars of Scotland. And I was chatting to him about it. And at the end, he handed me a bottle of that whiskey to take away. So just incredibly generous, not with his time, but also, with regards to his, I suppose, just giving away whatever he kind of had. And the big reason why the Bon Accord was such a successful bar was really down to him. So, our thoughts are with his family right now. It's very, very sad to hear about it. So we want to dedicate this episode to you, Paul. This one's for you, mate. Rest in peace.
Yes, indeed. What else have you been up to? It's been a busy week for you. Seen plenty of pictures of you out and about and catching up with our old friend, Mr. Darrell Halden.
Yeah, mate, I was kind of cheating on you a little bit. So it's been a crazy week.
It's all right. You got to have a hamburger every now and again to know how to appreciate a steak. Do you know what I
mean? Nice analogy. Guys, did you hear that? Yeah. We need to get him back on, actually. We're chatting about that when we were down there. But yeah, Daz is working for Beam Suntory now, doing a lot of work with Bowmore, obviously.
It's a little startup, isn't it?
Little startup.
Little startup called Beam Suntory. Good for him.
Yeah, they're doing all that work with Aston Martin. So he called me up and he was like, "Yeah, we've got some tickets for like VIP down at Goodwood with Aston Martin and their spot down there." So we moseyed on down to Goodwood, which I'd never been to before. Just absolutely insane, mate. I mean, there must be billions of pounds worth of cars down there. They had on the track, because we were there for the hill climb day. They had a Ferrari that was worth 300 million running up that track. I was just blown away by not only the cars that you could see, but the cars that they were actually doing this hill climb at the time. So yeah, really, really cool, man. Really cool to go down to Goodwood. But
I thought that was the name of their cooperage for some reason when you brought it up earlier.
Yeah, really?
No, fucking hell.
Well, hey, I know you're not a big car guy, so I wouldn't be surprised.
Aye, but Goodwood. Speaking of cars, by the way, guess where I was?
Vegas by any
I
chance?
was in Las Vegas this week. So I'm doing quite a bit of stuff in and out of Vegas. I'm there probably, like I was saying to you earlier, like every 2 months, I'm there for about 2 or 3 days, give or take. But Las Vegas is getting a Formula One. So there'll be 3 Formula 1 races now in the US. They'll have Austin, they'll have Miami, and then they'll have Las Vegas. And it's so if you Mitch, I know you've been to Vegas many times before. Picture the scene. They are digging up every single road around Las Vegas. So think of the strip just completely and utterly dug up on one side or the other. And, they're retarmacking everything because it has to be a completely different paving.
It's insane, man.
It's
I mean,
insane. The project that's gone on is nuts, but I had a blast there. So I was doing a whiskey tasting at Wakuda, which is inside the Palazzo. And then I went to Zuma inside the Cosmopolitan, which you and I used to hang out in quite a bit.
Of our old haunts, mate.
Yeah, brilliant spot. So the bartender there, May, was tasting some whiskey with us, and they were actually ended up going back there and drinking a little bit of the 15-year-old, which is flying off the shelf at the moment for old Shibui. And then had a couple of drinks with Best Friend. Have you ever been to Best Friend? It's inside the Nomad in MGM Park. It's
I don't think that was around in my day, mate.
It's probably my favorite property. It's a non-smoking casino hotel, which is rare in Las Vegas. Yeah. So I always stay at the Nomad. It's got a brilliant library bar, just a super cool spot. The GM there, Nick, is a great dude. And like, it's just a cool spot. So like Lady Gaga plays there every now and again. I think she's coming back. They're talking about her doing a bit of a return visit there. Heard it here first, folks. And but like there's a piano bar inside their library, and every now and again, her band manager comes and does like a jazz live set, and it's not unknown for her to show up unannounced and just like sing. And I think the last time he was telling a story, he said the last time she was in town, she came up on stage and asked to sing an a cappella version of Poker Face, sang it from start to finish, and folk were like, that was incredible. People didn't know it was her. She got up in a hoodie. So she got up like just like in a hoodie, like again under the radar, just sang Poker Face.
Mate, I thought this was going to lead into another Palaki celebrity story there for a second.
No, mate, no, not at all, not at all. I mean, I've got one for you if you want it, but I'm trying to dial them back.
Just save them, mate. Save them. We'll do another whole episode on that. I want to go back to that Formula One thing, though. You said before we started, we're going to do a live podcast from the F1 from the paddock, right? Is that
Mitch,
that out for us?
Spoken like somebody who's never been to the F1, because I can tell you, having been, you can't hear shit if you're standing there, unless you just want a podcast where it's 90 minutes of.
I have actually been to the F1 before, mate. I was in Miami last year.
You have?
Yeah.
Oh man, it's loud. It's brilliant. The Porsche race at the start. There's a lot of stuff. Like it's not just the main F1 race, but it's fun. It's a good day out.
I'm looking forward to hanging out with you there, mate. It's going to be fun.
As I said to you off before we started to record, Mitch, I do not have an abundance of tickets for this. I wish I did, but we're not quite there yet.
I only need one, mate. I only need one.
Okay, well, we'll see what we can do.
Now, it wasn't as glamorous as for me, going to Vegas, but I have been to a load of distilleries so far this month, which was kind of cool, and pretty much all small distilleries. So I was hanging out with the guys who are going to be creating the new Shetland distillery, which is really exciting to hang about with them and hear their plans. And our good friend was with us as well, Ian Miller.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, it was a good day in the office, mate. So we hit like 3 really small, crafty distilleries, which the first one was Daft Mill over in Fife.
Yep.
Hanging out with Francis, who I haven't been to that distillery for about 10 years. Really interesting to see what he's doing there. I need to take you over there, mate, when you're over next time. 100%. Just Francis, great guy, started as a farmer and he went, I'm going to start making whiskey. He's got a beautiful little distillery, creating really nice spirit. And the interesting part about going around these distilleries this day was we weren't doing it to talk about whiskey. We were doing it to talk about production and get like an insight from all these guys about, little issues they've had along the way or, what equipment they've used. So we were getting super geeky, man. We went to Strathern. I don't know if you've ever seen Strathern, but they've got these crazy, almost like cognac style stills And they're like, we don't have a spirit safe. We just kind of taste everything and then we cut when we know it's right, which is kind of nuts. Literally
Is
all
that
the new
legal?
make spirit. I don't know, but all the new make spirit is just going into like this metal bucket and they're just tasting out of it. But
That's
so that's kind of bizarre. And then we went to Lindores Abbey as well. The where we think the first ever recorded distillation of Scotch whiskey was done back in 1494.
Yep.
So again, a really cool distillery to go and see in Cooper and Fife.
Very nice.
And then to top off my kind of craft distillery tour, separate from that, I went over to Rassay. Now, if you guys are listening and heard last week's episode, because we're putting this out 2 days, I think, after I went to Rassay, and we dropped that episode very quickly after that happened. You'll have heard that interview I had with Alistair Day. But I mean, that place, just incredible, mate. Like, again, another distillery I'd love to take you over, bring Carrie over. They've got rooms there. Literally, the hotel is part of the distillery. Tasting room, restaurant. Like, Alistair's done an amazing job of knocking out of the park there. Really, really impressed with that. And, it's just nice to see all these small distilleries in Scotland and everything that's popping up right now.
Yeah. Speaking of distilleries popping up, not only just popping up new distilleries, but the resurgence of and revamping of mothball distilleries now coming back into the forefront. Speaking of which, Rosebank Distillery has just restarted production and filled its first cask, I think this month. So this is a distillery. Ian MacLeod Distillers, owners of Tamdhu and Glengong distilleries, own this property. It was shuttered in 1993, so just outside Falkirk, and they've been doing a full renovation process. They filled a barrel on the 18th of July, which was a refill bourbon cask. And they've renovated it even from absolute soup to nuts, which includes the new worm tub condensers, which were installed, which I think was originally credited for the distillery's kind of very fruity floral style distillate. And they've also even put in new stills, which are exact replicas of the originals, built on the original designs from Abercrombie Coppersmiths. So pretty cool stuff to see that coming back in. And I think, like you said, Mitch, like, new distilleries popping up and other distilleries that have been mothballed coming back to their former glories.
Yeah, and I love the team behind this. Gordon Dundas, who's been Ian MacLeod for a long time now.
Yeah,
great guy and just loves his whiskey. You've probably run into him a few times in the US, mate.
Many times. Good dude.
Yeah. So I saw his picture was in the kind of PR release from this, along with Lenny Russell, who's the owner. I got a good story about Lenny Russell. We ended up drinking till about 3 o'clock in the morning in a flat in Edinburgh once, and then just eating like horrible Mexican food and drinking Corona. It's brilliant. He's a good guy. Likes to party. But yeah, no, it's so cool to see Rosebank open again. One of the stories I heard, I don't know if this is true or not, but it was shut by Diageo in the 80s, right? It was like that big culling that happened in the 80s. And the story goes that Glenkinchie wasn't producing as good a liquid as Rosebank, but because of where Rosebank was situated and because it had a more English sounding name, that was why it was shut down. So
wild.
Kind of crazy, right? But I mean, that was always good juice. I remember drinking a few Rosebanks back in my Diageo days, and I think I've still got a bottle of like 22-year-old Rosebank from the rare cask release that Diageo did on it. So I'm super excited to see that, and I love what they've done with it. The pictures of it, they've done this really modern distillery, and then they've taken this the old chimney and renovated it.
Yeah.
Another crazy story. Did you ever hear the story about the theft in Rosebank, mate?
No.
This is a mad story. So guys basically got...
Did you get caught?
But one of the things that happened when Rosebank was shut down, some guys basically rented a transit van and got some high-vis vests, went in there and said they were there to take away the stills. Completely ballsy. I said, oh yeah, we're just here to dismantle the stills and take them away. They did so, and then someone went, oh yeah, those guys came to take the stills. There was no one here meant to take the stills. They just essentially stole them. So,
were they ever recovered?
No, I don't think so. Like, hats off to them.
Indeed.
Copper's pretty valuable, so I imagine that would have been cut up and sold. Kind of crazy. But anyway, moving away from Rosebank, let's look at some other news. The SWA just released quite an interesting framework, I suppose it is, for water stewardship for distilleries. Now, this is when you know water is getting pretty scarce in Scotland, which is a sentence I didn't think I'd ever hear me say. I mean, we've just gone through, I think, the driest June that we ever had on record. We literally hardly had any rain here. I mean, for me, it was incredible going around Speyside, seeing the Spey so low. Our good friend Dennis McBain said, that is the lowest he's ever seen the Spey in his life since he's lived there. He's been there 80 odd years now. So what we're looking at right now is basically, how do we conserve water within distilleries in Scotland? And this is the whole part of like water usage and, sustainability strategy that's coming out. So the whole idea is by 2025, the amount of water used by distillery per litre of alcohol produced needs to be between 12.5 and 25 litres. So that's quite a big step. Here's a pop quiz for you, Nicholas. How much water does it take to make a litre of whiskey?
Is this a bad joke, or is this an actual how many litres, or what is it?
This is an actual question.
How much water?
It's not a dad joke.
Is it in gallons or in litres?
Litres. We're not in America now, mate. Well, you are. I'm not.
I'm going to say 107.
For a litre? Are you insane? I know you like to exaggerate, but for fuck's sake.
Mate, I was just throwing out a number there to give you an easy layup. What, 22?
42.
42.
So that's quite a big step that they need to come down between 12 and 25. So it's interesting to see that has been put in place in Scotland. I mean, is this like a, sort of crystal glass looking into the future of how Scotch whisky is going to be further down the line in 2025? Are we going to have serious water shortages? Judging by our summers that we've had over the last couple of years, potentially that is a big issue. It's a big deal.
Or alternatively, are we just going to be drinking everything at cask strength so that there's no dilution?
It's not a bad shout.
Right, there you go. Problem solved. Anywho, speaking of geeky data and things like that, just taking a look at some of the stuff that this comes out every now and again. People will do these kind of I guess advanced looks at what they see the booze business looking at down the line. The alcohol sector is set at the rate that we're currently growing at by 2031 to hit a value of $2 trillion, which is very impressive. And within that, by 2028, the whiskey sales globally will hit $127 billion. Now, what's really impressive about that is obviously globally, Scotch stands out as the preferred whiskey right across the board. But the researchers in this are also looking at Scotch, Canadian whiskies, Japanese whiskies, as well as American and Irish whiskies, with the major players including Brown-Forman, Pernod Ricard, Beam Suntory, Bacardi, Edrington Group, Constellation Brands, and Diageo. So all good news for those guys. The overall sector at the moment could look at 1.6. The alcohol sector was valued at 1.6 trillion in 2022. So, when it's going to get to that 2 trillion mark by 2030, it's pretty impressive stuff. It's a solid compound annual growth of 2.5% by 2031. So really interesting to take a look at that. But great news to see Scotch whisky and other world whiskies really driving that as well.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's interesting it says leading the region in whiskey consumption is India, which is something we've discussed already. India is now number one for volume within the world. And I think the floodgates are going to open even more there shortly if we see this decrease in the duty on Scotch whisky.
Yeah, and what they are saying to challenge Scotch whisky, the Japanese whisky sector is noted to be challenging the long-standing dominance of Scotch whisky. So that is wonderful news for me.
Well, it isn't. That's a double-edged sword for you, mate, because you're Scottish
with a Japanese whiskey brand.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So the Scottish side of me, which is that frugal, brilliant.
Yeah.
No, joking aside, well, you know what? It's good to have a challenge if you're the number one and nobody's challenging you, and it gets boring at the top. So it's good to see that Japanese whiskies will help.
And I think we touched on that in that episode where we chatted about Nick Morgan's article. So correct. Definitely
100%.
So, other news, this is exciting. We've got a date now for the next one of one auction. Now, the one of one auction was held last year, and as the name suggests, this is where distilleries create one-off bottlings for this specific auction. And it's fascinating to see this. And Nicholas, I don't know if you saw this last year, but some of the bottles that were produced were just mind-blowing. So the new date for this is Thursday, 5th of October, 2023. The last one, which was in December 2021, they had 40 lots within that, and £2.4 million was donated to the charity that has been created for this auction, the Youth Action Fund. And the whole idea of this charity is to transform the lives of young people in Scotland between the ages of 16 and 25. And, we had Jonathan Driver, who I think you know as well, Nicholas, on the show, talking about all this. So if you guys want to know more about it, go back and check out that episode. It's fascinating to see it. I'm really interested to see what all the distilleries do with this. And I think the great thing about this is, we talk about how Scotch whiskey, everyone's friends, right? And I think some people might go, yeah, whatever, you're bullshitting. But this is a great example of this. This is all these distilleries getting together, creating a unique bottle for the charity, which is amazing to see.
Yeah, I love that. And again, a good example of the collaboration that you see in our industry. It's pretty cool.
100%.
Speaking of really cool things that are going on in our industry, Chivas is making its carbon and heat recovery program data open source. So basically, they're sharing all this amazing stuff that they've been working on. So to put this into context, Mitch, I don't know if you've heard of this or read any stuff about this, but Chivas, which is obviously part of Pernod Ricard, owners of Glenlivet and Chivas Regal, is sharing the design process and implementation insights for applying the technology at its Glentocher's distillery near Keith and Speyside. So these guys have been working on heat recovery technologies and including mechanical vapor recompression, otherwise known as MVR, Mitch, which I'm sure you're familiar with, and the old thermal vapor compression, the old TVR, as we like to call it in the biz. All super geeky stuff, but it's designed to capture and recycle heat generated in the distillation process. The equipment was supplied by Pillars, Blowers and Compressors, GmbH, whatever that stands for when it's not at home, a manufacturer of blowers and compressors, which works with Chivas Brothers to adapt its kit for the distilling industry. So this was equipment that was not designed to do this, being reapplied into the booze business. And this technology has had a massive impact. So for the total energy consumption at Glentocher's, it is reduced the total energy by 48% and its carbon emissions by 53%. Now, this is why it's important. And this is why I think it's impressive that Chivas have just said, everyone should use this. Here's how to apply. Here's all the data. Here's the build out. Here's the infrastructure, and just really shared best practice in order for the Scotch whisky industry to help hit lowering its emissions and its carbon footprint, which is going to help drive it towards net zero, which the Scotch Whisky Association has challenged the industry to achieve by 2040. This is a massive leap to help the entire industry do that. So first and foremost, hats off to Pernod Ricard and Chivas for sharing all this information, and hopefully many distilleries will follow suit and reap the benefit of reducing their carbon footprint, their emissions, and the value that it brings to them as a business and their savings.
Yeah, it's amazing to see. I love that as well. That's another example right there. I think when we did a whole piece on sustainability on the show, and we had Stuart Watts on, and he talked about how they created that technology for their trucks to run off draft, and then that technology was shared with Chivas as well. And I know they use that for all their Glenlivet trucks now. Yeah, so very cool. Another example of that happening, which is great to see.
Brilliant.
So exciting one on this one, mate. Speyburn. So if we go back to Spirit of Speyside Festival this year, Speyburn opened their doors to visitors for the first time, and it created like an absolute riot for people trying to get in there. Everyone went absolutely ballistic. Sure. And then they won the award for the best sort of event for the for the whole tour. So that was kind of cool to see that. And then they've just announced that they will now be opening their doors permanently for visitors coming up to Speyside. So I know with Coppercairn, this is definitely one of the things that I'm going to start putting on my my experiences with people, because it's a great little distillery just outside of Rothes. It's been producing for 126 years, but it's never opened its doors. So as from August 1st, you will be able to go and visit Speyburn. Some really cool things to see in there. And, you know, the tour that they're doing, they're talking about doing 3 tours a day. And you can, I think it's going to be 1 hour, 45 minutes for each tour. You can book it all online, which is great to see. I had a look at this the other day. It's got full visibility of timings and all that kind of stuff, which is always handy when you're booking a distillery tour, because the last thing you want is trying to phone them up. No one answers the phone and you don't know if you're going to get in or not and all that kind of bullshit. So these guys have done it right with regards to doing a tour. But again, another reason to come up to Speyside, as if there wasn't enough distilleries to visit. Now there's another one being added on there.
I love it. Actually, I was taking a look at this, which is super cool. Like some of the stuff that they've got there, they're all, obviously you get to see the dunnage warehouses, but they've got old drum maltings there as well. And as you'll know, the thing about old drum maltings, can't beat them.
There had to be one this episode, didn't there?
I've been sitting in that for 45 minutes, mate. See, when I saw old drum maltings, I was like, come on. That's like that's the easiest softball pitch I've ever had to bat.
Mate, is that why you're bright red right now? Because you've just been holding it in so much, you're just about to burst.
I'm bright red right now because I've been in Las Vegas for a week and I'm just sunburned.
But I tell you what, mate, there's been no sun over here. July has been horrendous in Scotland, so you haven't been missing anything here.
No, but you did get the heat wave last month, so
yeah, that was us.
Peaks and valleys, right? Peaks and valleys.
I've always said, like, if Scotland could just guarantee a really good summer, which it has done a couple of summers, to be fair, but this one's been like, June was just a little, oh, here you go, here's your summer, and then July was like, no, we're taking it away from you. Screw you. We're not giving you anything else.
Well, do you know what? This was a great blast just to catch up, Mitch. I'm glad we've done this. We have some amazing guests lined up for our future shows.
Yes, we do.
If your name appears in this list and you've not been contacted from us, this is you being served notice. You're going to be called up. So obviously, I think we have to have Daz back, right? We need to bring Daz on. There's a lot going on.
Yeah. He's definitely coming back. That's for sure. Right.
We're going to look at Kirsten Campbell. We're going to look at Dr. Bill Lumsden. We've got Richard Patterson's on our hit list. So, Mr. Patterson, if you're listening, make sure that you're clearing a bit of time in your calendar. We need to bring in Ricky Crawford, the original ambassador from Scotland that came out to basically launch Scotch whiskies in the USA for some of the biggest brands. So, we're going to bring him on. Sandy McIntyre as well, Tamdu. So, anyone else, Mitch, that you want to just...
I've just thought of something. Our good friend, Mr. Casper McRae, who just got a serious... promotion within Glenmorangie.
Absolutely. Casper's got, do you know, I still tell this story. Do you ever hear the story of Casper McRae sitting with the Queen's mum?
No.
So this is true story. So I don't know if you know this. So Casper's what, 6'7", 6'8"? Yeah, so he was a Queen's Guard. So I don't know if you know this. Prior to him getting into the whiskey business, he was a Queen's Guard, but specifically a Queen's Guard for the Queen's mum. So he would sit down and have dinner with the royal family and sit and at one point he told me this story, and I've told this a billion times since. He was sitting having dinner, and out of nowhere the Queen mum turned around to him and said, "So Casper, are you seeing anyone now?" And he was like, "Oh, yes, ma'am, yes, I am, I've got a girlfriend." He's, "Oh, wonderful. Is she mutard?" Casper was like, I'm sorry, ma'am, what did you say?" Is she mutard, Casper? And Casper was like, "I'm sorry, I don't quite hear what you're saying." She said, "Mutard, mustard, Casper, hot stuff."
Brilliant.
Wild. Yeah, no. Anyway, you're right. We should get Casper on.
Yeah, and look at him now. He's the CEO of Glenmorangie and Ardbeg. That's
exactly. That'll be an amazing box of whiskey we get through the door then when we ask him on.
Yeah, I think he does listen. So Casper, if you're listening on that train journey to East Lothian when you come in and out of Edinburgh, then hit us up. Well, we're going to hit you up soon, very soon.
get packing Mitch's care package of all the samples that I'm sure he'll get, and I'll get a thanks for asking maybe next time note.
Well, and the other thing we're going to do, so anyone listening in New York, let us know, hit us up. We are going to be looking for participants for our Whisky Live.
Correct.
Not another podcast live, I should say. Not another podcast. I can't believe that was a Daz move right there. He used to say that all the time. We're going to do a live version of the podcast in New York. So we're going to be looking for audience members. There you go. I spat that out.
Where I will be introducing my new co-host who can speak properly. So thanks for listening to Not Another Whisky Podcast, and we will catch you next time around.
Thanks for listening, guys. See y'all.